Blood stained her hands as the mare screamed in the darkness. This wasn't supposed to happen on her first night. Elena McRae had taken the midnight job at Harridan Ranch because she was desperate, broke, with nowhere else to turn. But the cowboy who hired her, Colt Harridan, stood beside her now with an intensity that felt like recognition, not introduction. What she didn't know was that he'd been waiting for her since spring, when his dying mother's letter arrived with a prophecy. The woman who comes at midnight will be the one who saves you. But first, Elena had to survive until dawn. Stay with me until the end of this story and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in a cloud of dust and creaking leather, and Elena McRae pressed her forehead against the window frame, trying to steady her breathing. Her hands were shaking, had been shaking since Denver, since the landlady had thrown her belongings into the street, since she'd counted her last coins and realized she had exactly $3.27 between herself and starvation. $3. In 1882 Colorado, that wouldn't even buy a week's worth of bread. The driver's gruff voice cut through her spiral of panic. Redemption Creek! End of the line! Elena closed her eyes and whispered a prayer her mother had taught her, not for salvation, but for courage. Then she gathered her worn carpetbag, straightened her threadbare traveling dress, and stepped down into the midnight street of a town she'd never heard of until 3 days ago. Redemption Creek was exactly what its name suggested, a last chance for people with nowhere else to go. The main street was a rutted dirt road flanked by wooden buildings that leaned toward each other like tired old men. Lamplight spilled from a few windows, a general store, a boarding house, and at the far end, a saloon called the Rusty Nail where rough laughter and piano music drifted into the cool night air. Elena's stomach clenched. She'd never been inside a saloon in her life. But the newspaper advertisement had been clear. Experienced hand needed for midnight ranch work. Inquire at the Rusty Nail Saloon, Redemption Creek. Ask for Harridan. She'd answered it because she was experienced. Her father had raised horses in Missouri before the fever took him and her mother within a week of each other. She'd answered it because midnight work meant fewer questions about a young woman traveling alone. She'd answered it because she had $3 and no other options. Now, standing in the darkness with dust settling on her shoulders, Elena wondered if desperation had driven her straight into danger. The saloon doors swung open, and a drunk stumbled out, nearly colliding with her. He squinted, swayed, then grinned with tobacco-stained teeth. Well, hello there, sweetheart. You lost? No. Elena stepped back, gripping her bag tighter. Excuse me? Come have a drink with me, he slurred, reaching for her arm. Pretty thing like you shouldn't be alone. The lady said no. The voice came from the saloon doorway, low, calm, and utterly unyielding. Elena looked up and felt something shift in her chest. The man standing in the lamplight was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and the kind of weathered face that came from years under the western sun. He wore dark trousers, a worn shirt rolled to his elbows, and a black hat that shadowed his eyes. But even in shadow, Elena could feel the weight of his gaze, steady, measuring, intense in a way that made her breath catch. The drunk fumbled backward. Didn't mean nothing, Colt, just being friendly. Go sleep it off, Jackson. The drunk muttered something under his breath and stumbled away down the street. The cowboy, Colt, watched until he disappeared around a corner, then turned his full attention to Elena. You're here about the job. It wasn't a question. Elena lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated even though her heart was hammering. I am. The advertisement said to ask for Harridan. That's me, Colt Harridan. He stepped closer, and Elena caught the scent of leather and wood smoke. You're late. Advertisement said to arrive before midnight. Elena glanced at the church clock visible down the street. 11:45. I'm early, actually. For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Fair enough. You have experience with horses? I was raised with them. My father bred quarter horses in Missouri. I can handle foaling, training, basic veterinary care. I've delivered over 30 foals, dealt with breech births, colic, founder. She met his eyes directly. I know what I'm doing, Mr. Harridan. He studied her for a long moment, and Elena had the strangest sensation that he was seeing something beyond her worn dress in desperate circumstances, something that satisfied him in a way she couldn't understand. "The job's overnight," he said finally. "Midnight to dawn, 6 nights a week. We've got 12 mares due to foal over the next month, and I need someone who can handle them without supervision. You'd sleep days, work nights, stay in the bunkhouse near the stables. Pay is $20 a month plus room and board." $20. Elena's knees nearly buckled with relief. That was enough to save, to rebuild, to survive. "Can you start tonight?" Colt asked. "Yes." "No questions about the work? About why it's midnight hours?" Elena met his gaze steadily. "I assume you want someone watching the mares when you can't. Makes sense during foaling season, and I'm not afraid of night work, Mr. Harridan." Something shifted in his expression. Approval, perhaps, or recognition. He nodded once. "Come inside. We'll sign the papers, then I'll take you out to the ranch." Elena followed him through the saloon doors, acutely aware of the sudden hush that fell over the room. Rough men in dusty clothes turned to stare, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed hunger. She kept her eyes forward, her spine straight, and walked directly to the table where Colt had settled with a whiskey bottle and 2 glasses. He poured amber liquid into both glasses but didn't drink. Instead, he pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket and smoothed it on the scarred wooden table. "Standard employment contract," he said. "Room, board, $20 a month paid at month's end. You're responsible for the overnight care of the horses, feeding, checking water, monitoring the pregnant mares, assisting with births when needed. You report any problems directly to me. You don't answer to anyone else on the ranch." Elena read the contract carefully, surprised by the clarity of the terms. Most ranch jobs for women came with unwritten expectations: cooking, cleaning, other duties as assigned. This was straightforward, horses only. "Why midnight to dawn?" she asked, because she needed to understand what she was walking into. "Most ranch work happens during daylight." Colt's jaw tightened slightly. "I've got 3 ranch hands who work days. Good men, but none of them know horses like they need to during foaling season. I've lost 2 foals in the past year because nobody caught the complications in time." He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. "I can't afford to lose more, and I can't be in the stables every night myself. I've got other responsibilities." It made sense, it was practical. And yet Elena couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else, something he wasn't saying. The way he watched her, it wasn't suspicion or doubt. It was almost like anticipation. "I'll do good work for you, Mr. Harridan," she said quietly, picking up the pen he'd offered. "You won't regret hiring me." "I know." The certainty in his voice startled her. She looked up, and for a moment their eyes locked. His dark and intense, hers wide and uncertain. Then she signed her name in careful script, Elena Marie McRae. Colt signed below her, his handwriting bold and sure. Then he stood, drained his whiskey in one swallow, and gestured toward the door. "Wagon's outside. It's a 40-minute ride to the ranch." Elena followed him into the cool night air, relieved to escape the saloon's oppressive atmosphere. A sturdy wagon waited in the street, hitched to 2 patient horses. Colt helped her up with a hand that was calloused and strong, then swung up beside her and took the reins. They rode in silence through the sleeping town and out into open country. The moon was 3/4 full, casting silver light across rolling hills and scattered pine trees. The air smelled of sage and distant rain, and despite her exhaustion, Elena felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she'd been carrying since her parents died, since she'd been alone. "Where are you from?" Colt asked after a while, his voice low enough not to startle the horses. "Missouri originally, more recently Denver, though that didn't work out." "Family?" "Gone. Both parents passed 2 years ago. Fever." She felt rather than saw his nod of understanding. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." Elena paused, then asked, "What about you? Is Harridan Ranch a family operation?" "It was. My father built it 30 years ago, cattle ranch originally, but he died last winter and I've been shifting toward horses. Better profit margin, less overhead." Colt's voice was matter-of-fact, but Elena heard the edge beneath it. "My brother Lucas helps run things, And we've got a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who's been with us since I was a boy. The hands I mentioned, Dutch, Briggs, and a kid named Timothy who's still learning. Sounds like a good operation. It will be. He glanced at her, and even in the moonlight she could see the intensity of his gaze. Once we get through this foaling season. The wagon crested a hill, and Elena caught her breath. Below them, nestled in a valley between rolling hills, was Harridan Ranch. The main house was a sprawling two-story structure with lamplight glowing in one downstairs window. Beyond it stood a massive barn, several corrals, and what looked like bunkhouses and storage sheds. Even in darkness, she could sense the careful organization, the pride of ownership. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Colt's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "It's home." He drove the wagon past the main house toward a small cabin near the stables. "That's where you'll stay," he said, pointing to a tidy structure with a porch and shuttered windows. "It's simple but clean. Mrs. Chen stocked it this afternoon. You'll find blankets, supplies, everything you need. The stables are just there." He gestured to the barn. "Mares are in the large stalls on the east side. Feed stored in the tack room. Fresh water in the pump outside." Elena climbed down from the wagon, her legs unsteady after the long journey. Colt lifted her carpet bag down with easy strength and set it on the cabin porch. "Get settled," he said. "I'll show you the stables in 20 minutes. "I can start now." 20 minutes, Miss McRae. You've been traveling all day. Take a moment." His voice was firm, but not unkind, and Elena realized he was right. She was swaying with exhaustion, running on fear and determination rather than strength. She nodded and watched as he led the wagon horses toward the barn. The cabin was indeed simple. One room with a narrow bed, a small stove, a table and chair, and hooks on the wall for hanging clothes. But it was clean, and the quilts on the bed looked warm, and there was a basin of fresh water waiting on the table. Elena washed her face and hands, changed into her work dress, a sturdy brown cotton that had seen better days but was still serviceable, and pinned her dark hair into a tight bun. She'd just finished when Colt knocked on the door frame. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes." The stables were warm and fragrant with hay and horse. Soft rustling and occasional snorts greeted them as they entered. Colt lit several lanterns hanging from posts, bathing the interior in golden light. 12 mares, he said, walking her down the central aisle. "Due dates range from next week to 6 weeks out. I've got them listed here." He tapped a slate hanging on the wall, "with their names and expected dates. This is Bella. She's the closest." He stopped at a large stall where a bay mare stood, her belly heavy with pregnancy. Elena approached slowly, letting the mare catch her scent before she touched her. Bella's ears pricked forward with interest, and Elena ran her hand along the smooth neck, then down to the swollen sides. She felt carefully, professionally, noting the position and movement. "Feels like she's got another week, maybe 10 days, Elena said. "Good position, though. Should be a straightforward birth." Colt watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You can tell that just by touch?" "My father taught me. He said good horsemen learn to see with their hands." Elena moved to the next stall, repeating the process with a gray mare named Storm. "This one's further along. I'd say 3, 4 days maximum." She continued down the line, introducing herself to each mare, checking their condition with gentle, confident hands. Colt followed silently, and Elena was acutely aware of his presence, the way he moved with quiet grace, the way his shadow fell long in the lamplight, the way he watched her as if memorizing every gesture. By the time she'd met all 12 mares, she felt more grounded than she had in months. This was work she understood, animals she could help. This was purpose. "They're beautiful horses," she said, turning to face Colt. "Well cared for. You've done good work with them." "Thank you." He leaned against a post, his hat pushed back slightly. "Your father taught you well, Miss McRae." "He taught me everything he knew. I just wish—" Elena's throat tightened. "I wish I could have saved him the way I can save these horses." Colt was quiet for a moment. Then very gently he said, "Fever's different. That's not something skill can fix." "I know. But knowing doesn't make it easier." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." They stood in the warm silence of the stable, surrounded by drowsy horses and the smell of hay. Elena felt something shift between them, an understanding, perhaps, or a shared grief. Whatever it was, it made her feel less alone. The night routine is simple, Colt said finally, his voice returning to business. Check on each mare every 2 hours. Make sure they have water and hay. If anyone shows signs of labor, pacing, tail raising, lying down repeatedly, you stay with her. There's a bell outside the stable. He pointed to a large brass bell mounted near the door. If there's trouble you can't handle, ring it. I'll hear it from the house. You sleep that lightly? A shadow crossed his face. I don't sleep much anyway. Before Elena could respond, he continued. Mrs. Chen will leave meals for you in the kitchen. That's the small building next to the main house. Help yourself whenever you're hungry. And if you need anything, supplies or repairs, just let me know. Mr. Harridan, Elena said carefully, why did you hire me without checking references, without even asking where I learned my skills beyond what I told you? He met her eyes directly. Because I believe in reading people, Miss McRae. And when I look at you, I see someone who knows horses, who won't quit when things get hard, and who needs this job as much as I need someone I can trust in these stables. He paused. Am I wrong? No, Elena admitted softly. You're not wrong. Then we'll do fine together. He pushed away from the post and settled his hat more firmly. I'll leave you to it. Dawn's at 6. I'll come check in before you finish your shift. He was halfway to the door when Elena called out, Mr. Harridan? He turned back. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Colt's expression softened in a way that transformed his entire face. Suddenly, he looked younger, less burdened, almost hopeful. You're welcome, Elena. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his low voice sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading into the night, and Elena was alone with 12 pregnant mares and a job that felt like salvation. She made her rounds carefully, checking water buckets and hay nets, talking softly to each horse as her father had taught her. Storm seemed restless, so Elena stayed with her a while, rubbing the mare's neck and humming an old lullaby her mother used to sing. The hours passed peacefully. Elena found a rhythm in the work, checking, feeding, watching. Around 3 a.m, she heard a sound from Bella's stall and found the mare lying down, breathing hard. Labor. Elena's heart kicked into high gear, but her hands stayed steady. She'd done this dozens of times. She could handle this. She moved into the stall, speaking in low, soothing tones. Bella's eyes rolled with fear and pain, and Elena knelt in the straw, placing her hands on the heaving sides. Easy, girl. I've got you. Let's see what we're working with here. The foal was positioned correctly, front hooves and nose, just as they should be. Elena breathed a sigh of relief. This would be straightforward, just like she'd predicted. But 45 minutes later, when the foal still hadn't made progress despite strong contractions, Elena's relief turned to concern. Something was wrong. The mare was pushing hard, but the foal wasn't moving. She needed help. Elena ran to the stable door and rang the bell, 3 sharp peals that cut through the night silence. Then she rushed back to Bella, whose breathing was becoming labored. Colt appeared in the doorway less than 3 minutes later, his shirt unbuttoned and his hair disheveled, but his eyes sharp and focused. What's wrong? Bella's in labor, but the foal's stuck. Position looks good, but she's been pushing for 45 minutes with no progress. I think... Elena swallowed hard. I think the foal might be too large. Colt was beside her in an instant, his hands joining hers on the mare's belly. How long has she been down? 50 minutes total. We need to help her. Colt's voice was calm, controlled. Can you reach in and assess? Elena nodded, rolling up her sleeves. This was the critical moment, the moment that would prove whether she truly deserved this job or had been lying about her experience. She washed her hands in the clean water bucket Colt brought her, then carefully, gently, reached inside the laboring mare. Her fingers found the foal's legs, traced upward to the head. Everything was positioned correctly, but the shoulders were broad, too broad for the birth canal. The foal was alive. She could feel the heartbeat, but if they didn't act quickly, both mother and baby would die. It's shoulder dystocia, Elena said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. The foal's too big. We need to rotate it. Can you do it? Elena met Colt's eyes across the laboring mare. In them, she saw not doubt but trust, complete unwavering trust that she knew what she was doing. "Yes," she said, "but I need you to keep Bella calm." What followed was the longest, most terrifying hour of Elena's life. With Colt murmuring steadily to Bella, stroking her neck and keeping her still, Elena worked with patient, careful hands to rotate the foal inside the birth canal. It was delicate, agonizing work. One wrong move could injure the foal or tear the mare internally. Sweat dripped into Elena's eyes. Her arms ached. The mare groaned with each contraction, and Elena could feel the animal's strength fading. "Come on," she whispered. "Just a little more. Come on, baby. Help me out here." And then, suddenly, miraculously, she felt the shift. The shoulders rotated, the foal's body aligned, and with the next contraction, the tiny hooves emerged further. "She's coming!" Elena gasped. "Colt, she's coming!" Two more contractions, and the foal slid into Elena's waiting hands, a perfect filly, dark and wet and gasping her first breaths. Elena cleared the foal's airway with shaking hands, rubbing the small body vigorously until the filly's breathing steadied. Behind them, Bella lifted her head, whinnying softly. "You did it," Colt said, his voice rough with emotion. "Elena, you did it." Elena looked up at him, and in the lamplight she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Admiration, yes, but also something deeper, something that looked almost like reverence. "We did it," she corrected, too exhausted to process the way he was looking at her. "You kept Bella calm. That was just as important." Colt helped her to her feet, his hands strong and steady on her arms. They were both covered in blood and fluids and straw, standing in a stable at 4 a.m, watching a newborn filly struggle to stand on spindly legs, and Elena had never felt more alive. "I knew you were the right one," Colt said softly, almost to himself. Elena turned to look at him. "What?" But he just shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. "Nothing. Come on, let's get you cleaned up. Mrs. Chen will be scandalized if she sees you looking like you wrestled a bear." They worked together to settle Bella and her filly, making sure both were stable and comfortable. Then Colt walked Elena back to her cabin as the first hints of dawn lightened the eastern sky. At her door he paused. "You saved them both tonight. That mare and foal would have died without your skill." "It's what you hired me for," Elena said, though her heart was beating too fast for such a casual statement. "No," Colt said quietly, his dark eyes holding hers. "I hired you for this moment, but you're going to mean so much more than that." Before Elena could ask what he meant, he tipped his hat and walked away, leaving her standing on the porch as the sun rose over Harridan Ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Elena watched him go, her mind spinning with exhaustion and confusion and something that felt dangerously like hope. She didn't understand what had just happened, not fully. Didn't understand the way Colt had looked at her, or the certainty in his voice, or the feeling that her life had just changed in some fundamental, irreversible way. But she knew one thing. She'd taken a midnight job because she was desperate and broke and alone. And somehow, impossibly, she'd found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. She just didn't know yet that Colt Harridan had been waiting for this exact moment since spring, since the day his dying mother had pressed a letter into his hands and whispered, "The woman who comes at midnight will be the one who saves you. Not just the horses, my son, but you." Elena didn't know, but she would. Elena woke to the smell of fresh bread and the sound of birds singing outside her window. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the night came flooding back. The birth, the struggle, Colt's eyes in the lamplight. She sat up, wincing at the soreness in her arms and back. Sunlight streamed through the cabin's small window, and when she checked the pocket watch her father had given her, she discovered it was nearly 2 p.m. She'd slept for almost 8 hours. A basket sat on her porch when she opened the door. Fresh bread, butter, jam, apples, and a jar of what looked like chicken soup. A note in elegant handwriting read, "Welcome to Harridan Ranch. Rest well. Mrs. Chen." Elena ate ravenously, suddenly aware that she hadn't had a proper meal in days. The bread was still warm, the butter creamy and rich. She felt strength returning to her limbs with each bite. After washing and changing into a clean dress, she made her way to the stables. The afternoon sun was warm on her shoulders, and the ranch bustled with activity. Men working in the corrals, the ring of a hammer from the smithy, chickens scratching in the yard near the main house. Inside the stable, she found Bella and her filly doing beautifully. The baby was nursing, her little tail whisking back and forth with contentment. Elena's chest swelled with pride and relief. She's a fighter, that one. Elena turned to find a petite Chinese woman in a crisp apron watching her from the stable entrance. The woman's face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and kind. "Mrs. Chen?" Elena asked. "Yes, and you are Elena McRae, the woman who saved Bella last night." Mrs. Chen approached the stall, smiling at the filly. "Mr. Colt. He came to breakfast this morning looking happier than I've seen him in a year. He said you were extraordinary." Heat crept into Elena's cheeks. "I just did what needed doing." Mrs. Chen's knowing gaze swept over her. "That is what he said you would say. He knows you better than you think, that man." "We only met last night." "Yes." Mrs. Chen's smile turned mysterious. "But he has been waiting much longer than that." Before Elena could ask what she meant, a commotion erupted from the yard. Men's voices raised in greeting, the thunder of hooves. Elena followed Mrs. Chen outside to see a group of riders approaching the main house. At their head rode Colt, his black hat silhouetted against the blue sky. He swung down from his horse with fluid grace, handing the reins to a young man who couldn't have been more than 16. Then his eyes found Elena across the yard, and even at a distance she felt the impact of that gaze. "Miss McRae," he called, walking toward her. "You're up. Did you rest well?" "Very well, thank you, and please call me Elena." "Elena." The way he said her name was like a caress. "Then you should call me Colt." He'd changed clothes since dawn. Now he wore dark trousers and a deep blue shirt that made his eyes look almost black. Dust streaked his face and forearms, and there was a satisfaction in his expression that suggested a successful day's work. "I checked on Bella and the filly," Elena said. "They're both doing wonderfully." "Thanks to you." Colt glanced toward the stable, then back to her. "I was thinking, would you join me for supper tonight, before your shift starts? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." Elena's pulse quickened. "Of course." 6 o'clock, main house dining room. He smiled, and the transformation of his usually serious face was startling. "Mrs. Chen's making pot roast." "I heard that," Mrs. Chen called from the porch, amusement in her voice. "And I'm making apple pie, too. Don't be late." Colt's smile widened, and for just a moment, Elena saw beyond the stoic cowboy to the man beneath, someone who carried burdens but hadn't forgotten how to feel joy. Then one of the ranch hands called his name, and he tipped his hat to her before striding away. "That man," Mrs. Chen said softly, "has not smiled like that since his mother died." Elena turned to her. "How long ago was that?" 6 months. March, when the snow was still on the ground. Mrs. Chen's expression grew sad. She was a wonderful woman, Catherine Harridan, strong and kind. She made this ranch a home, not just a business. When she got sick, the older woman shook her head. "Mr. Colt, he took it very hard. He loved her more than anything in this world." "What about his father?" Mrs. Chen's face hardened. "Samuel Harridan was a hard man, good at running cattle, bad at everything else. He died drunk last winter, fell off his horse in a snowstorm. Mr. Colt found him frozen in the north pasture." She paused. She ate. "He didn't mourn that death the way he mourned his mother's." Elena thought about the shadows she'd seen in Colt's eyes, the way he'd said he didn't sleep much. Grief could do that to a person. She knew from experience. "Does he have other family?" "A brother, Lucas. You'll meet him soon enough. He manages the cattle side of the operation while Mr. Colt focuses on the horses." Mrs. Chen studied Elena thoughtfully. "The brothers are not much alike. Lucas is louder, easier to read. Mr. Colt keeps his thoughts close, but they're loyal to each other. That much is the same." The rest of the afternoon passed quickly. Elena spent time with each mare, making notes on a slate about their conditions and progress. She met the ranch hands, Dutch, a grizzled man in his 50s who'd worked for Colt's father, Briggs, quiet and competent, and young Timothy, eager to learn everything. "You really delivered that filly all by yourself?" Timothy asked, his eyes wide with admiration. "Colt helped," Elena said firmly. "Teamwork matters in this kind of work." Dutch snorted. "Boss doesn't usually work the berths. Too busy with everything else. Must have been special, him staying up all night like that." Elena didn't know what to say to that, so she focused on checking Storm's water bucket. But she felt Dutch's knowing gaze on her back and wondered what the ranch hands were making of her sudden appearance. At 6 o'clock precisely, Elena knocked on the main house door. She'd changed into her only decent dress, a dark green cotton that her mother had made for her 3 years ago. It was slightly faded, but still respectable, and she'd taken care to arrange her hair in a soft bun at the nape of her neck. Mrs. Chen opened the door with a warm smile. Come in, come in. Mr. Colt is waiting in the dining room." The main house was beautiful in an understated way. Polished wood floors, simple furniture built to last, windows that let in the evening light. Watercolor landscapes hung on the walls, and Elena recognized the rolling hills of the ranch in several of them. "My mother painted those," Colt said from the dining room doorway. "She loved this land." He'd cleaned up too, his dark hair still damp from washing, wearing a fresh shirt and vest. Without the dust and grime of ranch work, he looked almost formal and devastatingly handsome in a way that made Elena's breath catch. "They're lovely," she managed. The dining room table was set for two, with simple china and wildflowers in a glass jar as a centerpiece. Colt held out a chair for her, and Elena sat, acutely aware of how long it had been since anyone had treated her like a lady, rather than a desperate woman looking for work. Mrs. Chen brought out the pot roast, and it was everything Elena had hoped: tender beef, roasted vegetables, rich gravy. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Colt spoke. "I want to apologize for last night," he said. Elena looked up in surprise. "Apologize? Why?" "I threw you into the deep end on your first night. That birth, it could have gone badly. I should have been there from the start, not made you ring for help." "Colt, I'm not a child who needs supervision. You hired me because I know what I'm doing." Elena set down her fork. "And if I'd needed help sooner, I would have called sooner. That's what the bell is for." He studied her for a long moment. "You're not like most women I've met." Should I take that as a compliment or an insult? A compliment. His mouth quirked. Most people, when they're new to a job, they try to prove themselves by hiding their weaknesses. You do the opposite. You're honest about what you can and can't handle. That takes courage. My father used to say that false confidence around horses gets people killed. Better to admit what you don't know and learn from someone who does. Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was." Elena's throat tightened. "I miss him every day. Both of them. My mother, too." Colt reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers briefly. The touch was warm, gentle, and somehow steadied the grief that always lurked beneath her surface. "I understand. My mother—" He paused, his jaw tightening. "She was the best person I've ever known. Losing her felt like losing my compass. Everything since has been trying to figure out which direction to go without her." In that moment, Elena saw past his stoic exterior to the raw pain beneath. They were the same, she realized. Two people trying to navigate a world that had taken away the people who'd taught them how to live in it. "I think," she said softly, "that we honor them by living the way they taught us, by being the kind of people they believed we could be." Colt's eyes met hers, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, a connection that went deeper than words. "My mother used to say something similar. She said that grief is just love with nowhere to go, so we have to find new places to put it." That's beautiful. She was a writer at heart, always putting feelings into words the rest of us couldn't find. He withdrew his hand, but the warmth of his touch lingered on Elena's skin. "She left me a letter before she died. I've read it 100 times trying to understand what she meant." "What did it say?" Colt was quiet for so long that Elena thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he said, "She told me to open my heart, said I'd become too much like my father, focused on work and duty, forgetting there was more to life. She said—" He paused, his expression unreadable. She said someone would come who would remind me how to live, not just survive. And I'd know her when I saw her. Elena's heart was pounding now. Do you think she meant— I don't know what she meant, Colt interrupted, but his eyes told a different story. I just know that when you stepped off that stagecoach last night, something in me recognized you. And watching you work with Bella, the way you talked to her, the way you fought for that foal— He shook his head. I've never seen anything like it. Before Elena could respond, the dining room door burst open and a man strode in, tall like Colt but broader in the shoulders, with lighter hair and an easy smile that was the opposite of Colt's careful reserve. Sorry I'm late. Heard we had a new hire and I wanted to meet— He stopped short, his eyes widening as he took in the intimate table setting, the flowers, the way Colt and Elena were leaning toward each other. Oh, I'm interrupting. Lucas, Colt's voice held a warning. This is Elena McRae, our new night hand. Elena, my brother Lucas. Lucas's grin was immediate and knowing. The woman who saved Bella. I heard all about it from Dutch. Said you worked a miracle. He offered his hand and Elena shook it, noting the genuine warmth in his grip. Welcome to Harridan Ranch, Miss McRae. Though I gotta say, my brother usually doesn't have candlelit dinners with the hired help. It's not candlelit, Colt said flatly, only because it's still light out. Lucas grabbed a roll from the basket on the table, ignoring Colt's glare. So, Elena, what do you think of our operation so far? It's impressive, Elena said honestly. Well run, good horses, clearly people who care about their work. That's all Colt's doing. Since he took over, he's turned this place around. Lucas's expression grew more serious. Our father ran it into the ground with drinking and bad decisions. Colt spent the last year rebuilding everything: reputation, finances, morale. It's been a hell of a job. Lucas, Colt's voice was sharp now. Elena doesn't need to hear about family business. Why not? She's part of the ranch now, isn't she? Lucas looked between them and his knowing smile returned. Or is she going to be part of the family in other ways too? Colt stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. That's enough. Don't you have somewhere else to be? Actually, I came to tell you there's trouble with the fence line in the north pasture. Couple of posts down, cattle getting through. We need to ride out tomorrow and fix it before we lose any steers. Fine. We'll go at first light. Colt's jaw was tight with frustration. Now leave. Lucas gave Elena a cheerful salute. Nice meeting you, Miss McRae. I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of each other. With that parting shot, he sauntered out, leaving an awkward silence in his wake. Colt sat back down heavily, running a hand through his hair. I apologize for my brother. He thinks he's funny. He seems nice, Elena offered, though she was still processing Lucas's implications. He's a pain in the ass. But there was affection beneath Colt's exasperation. He means well, but he doesn't know when to shut his mouth. Mrs. Chen appeared with apple pie, her expression suggesting she'd heard every word from the kitchen. Dessert, she announced, setting generous slices in front of them. And Mr. Lucas already ate his portion, so don't feel bad about him leaving. After she departed, Elena picked up her fork and met Colt's eyes. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why did you really invite me to dinner tonight? You said there was something you wanted to discuss. Colt was silent for a moment, his fingers tracing the edge of his plate. I wanted to make sure you were settling in all right, that you had everything you needed. That's kind, but you could have asked me that in the stables. You're right. He looked up, and the intensity in his dark eyes made Elena's breath catch. Truth is, I wanted to spend time with you away from work. To talk like people, not just employer and employee. Is that all right? Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. Yes, that's all right. They finished dessert in a silence that felt charged with possibility, with things unsaid but deeply felt. When Elena stood to leave, Colt walked her to the door. Thank you for dinner, she said, and for the conversation. It's been a long time since I talked to someone about anything that mattered. Me too. Colt reached out, his hand hovering near her cheek before falling back to his side, as if he'd caught himself about to cross a line. Good luck tonight, though I doubt you'll need it. Elena walked back to her cabin in the gathering dusk, her mind whirling. She changed into her work clothes and headed to the stables, where the familiar routine of checking on the mares helped settle her racing thoughts. But she couldn't stop thinking about the way Colt had looked at her across the dinner table. The way his mother's letter had predicted someone would come who would teach him to live again. The way Lucas had smiled like he knew a secret. The night passed peacefully. Elena made her rounds, talking softly to the horses, checking water and hay, monitoring the pregnant mares for any signs of distress. Around 2 in the morning, she was sitting in Storm's stall, her back against the wall, humming the lullaby her mother had taught her, when she heard footsteps in the stable aisle. Colt appeared in the lamplight, wearing the same clothes from dinner, but with his sleeves rolled up and his hair disheveled, as if he'd been trying to sleep and failing. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Fine. Storm's restless but not in labor yet. I'm just keeping her company. Mind if I join you?" Elena shook her head, and Colt settled onto the straw beside her, leaving a respectable distance between them. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the horses breathe and the soft rustle of hay. "Can't sleep?" Elena asked finally. "Never can. Not since—" He trailed off, then started again. "Not since my mother died. I lie awake thinking about everything that needs doing, everything that could go wrong. The ranch, the horses, the men depending on me for their livelihoods. Sometimes I come out here because at least the horses don't expect me to have all the answers." Elena turned to look at him. In the dim lamplight, he looked younger, more vulnerable. "That's a heavy burden to carry alone." "It's my responsibility." "Responsibility doesn't mean you have to bear it by yourself." She hesitated, then added, "My father used to say that's what partnership is for, sharing the weight so no one gets crushed under it." "Is that what we have? A partnership?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Elena met his eyes and saw uncertainty there, hope mixed with fear. "I think," she said carefully, "that we could, if we both wanted it." Colt was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "When I placed that advertisement in the Denver paper, I told myself I was just hiring help for foaling season. But that wasn't the whole truth." "What was the truth?" He took a deep breath. "My mother's letter, the one I mentioned at dinner. She wrote it 2 days before she died, when she knew she was fading. She told me I'd become too closed off, too focused on duty. She said I needed to find someone who understood hard work and loss, someone strong enough to stand beside me rather than behind me. And she said I'd recognize her when she came." He turned to face Elena fully. "She said she'd come at midnight." Elena's breath caught. "You think she meant me?" "I don't know what I think. I just know that when you stepped into the Rusty Nail Saloon at midnight, looking fierce and frightened and determined all at once, something in my chest shifted, like a door I'd locked open just a crack." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "And working with you last night, watching you fight for Bella and her foal, that door opened wider." "Colt." Elena didn't know what to say. Her practical mind told her this was too fast, too intense, too much weight to put on a chance meeting and a job offer. But her heart, her lonely, grieving heart, recognized the truth in his words. "I'm not asking for anything," Colt said quickly. "I just wanted you to understand why I watch you the way I do. Why I came out here tonight when I should be sleeping. Why having you on this ranch feels like something shifting into place." Elena reached out and took his hand, marveling at how right it felt, his calloused palm against hers, his fingers strong and warm. "I came here desperate and alone, expecting nothing more than a paycheck and a place to sleep, but you've given me something I didn't know I was missing." "What's that?" "Hope," she said simply. "The feeling that maybe my life isn't over just because I lost my parents, that maybe there's still good things ahead." Colt's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, the gesture both tender and grounding. "There are. I promise you that." They sat like that until dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, talking in low voices about their childhoods, their losses, their dreams for the future. Elena learned that Colt had wanted to be a horse trainer since he was a boy, that his father had mocked that dream and pushed him toward cattle. She told him about her mother's garden, her father's laugh, the way her world had collapsed when fever took them both. And slowly, in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, something grew between them. A connection built on shared grief and mutual respect, on the kind of understanding that can't be forced or faked. When the sun finally rose, Colt walked Elena back to her cabin. At her door, he paused. Get some rest, he said. You've earned it. So have you. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll actually sleep knowing you're here. He smiled, that rare, transformative smile that made him look almost boyish. See you tonight? I'll be in the stables. I know. He tipped his hat and walked away, and Elena watched him go with a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the rising sun. The pattern continued for the next week. Elena worked her nights in the stables, and Colt appeared sometime between midnight and dawn, always with some excuse, checking on a mare, looking for a lost piece of tack, unable to sleep. They never acknowledged what was really happening, that these quiet hours together had become the center of both their days. During one such visit, Elena was brushing Storm when Colt leaned against the stall door, watching her work with an expression she was learning to read. Contentment mixed with something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken. You're good at this, he said. Not just the technical skill, but the way you connect with them. Storm hasn't let anyone brush her in months, but she stands for you like a lamb. She just needed someone to listen. Elena ran the brush along Storm's gray neck in long, soothing strokes. Horses are like people that way. They know when you're really paying attention versus just going through the motions. Is that what you think I'm doing? Just going through the motions? Elena turned to face him, caught off guard by the vulnerability in his voice. No, I think you care deeply about everything and everyone on this ranch. Maybe too deeply. You carry it all like it's your personal responsibility to make sure nothing ever goes wrong. Isn't it? Not alone, Colt. That's what I'm trying to tell you. She set down the brush and crossed to the stall door, standing close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. You have Lucas, Mrs. Chen, the hands, me. You don't have to shoulder everything by yourself. He reached through the gap between the rails and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather-light and achingly gentle. I'm not used to letting people help. My father taught me that needing anyone was weakness. Your father was wrong. I'm starting to understand that. His hand lingered near her cheek, and Elena held her breath, wondering if he would kiss her. But instead he stepped back, clearing his throat. I should let you work. Just wanted to check in. Colt, wait. Elena opened the stall door and stepped into the aisle beside him. You don't have to leave. I like when you're here. The admission hung between them, brave and terrifying. Colt's expression softened in a way that made Elena's heart ache. I like being here, he said quietly. More than I should, probably. Why more than you should? Because you work for me. Because it's only been a week. Because I don't want to pressure you or make you uncomfortable, or... Elena stepped closer, cutting off his words. You're not pressuring me, and I'm not uncomfortable. She searched for the right word. I'm hopeful. Is that all right? More than all right. Colt's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. I just don't want to rush this. Whatever this is. Then we won't rush. Elena squeezed his hand. We'll just let it be what it is, one night at a time. They stood like that in the lamplight, holding hands in a stable at 3 a.m. while the horses dozed around them, and Elena thought that she'd never felt safer or more seen in her entire life. The peaceful rhythm shattered on Elena's 9th night at Harridan Ranch. She was making her midnight rounds when she heard sounds from outside, horses whinnying in alarm, men's voices shouting. Elena ran to the stable door and saw 3 riders approaching in the darkness, moving fast toward the corral where Colt kept his prized breeding stallion. Rustlers. Elena's heart hammered as she watched the men work quickly to cut the corral gate. She reached for the bell to raise the alarm, but before she could ring it, she heard a sound behind her, bootsteps in the dirt. Don't move, pretty lady. A hand clamped over her mouth, and Elena was yanked backward against a hard chest. She fought, kicking and clawing, but the man was too strong. His breath reeked of whiskey as he laughed in her ear. Boss said there might be someone in the stables. Didn't mention she'd be a little spitfire. Elena bit down hard on his palm. The man yelped and loosened his grip just enough for her to break free. She lunged for the bell and rang it 3 times, the sound cutting through the night like a scream. The rustler grabbed her again, spinning her around, his fist raised. Elena braced for the blow, but it never came. A dark shape tackled the man from the side, and they both went down in a tangle of limbs and curses. Colt. He fought with a fury Elena had never seen, his fists connecting with brutal efficiency. The rustler tried to fight back, but Colt was faster, stronger, driven by a rage that seemed to come from somewhere deep and primal. "Touch her again, and I'll kill you," Colt snarled, his forearm pressed against the man's throat. "Do you understand me?" The rustler gurgled something that might have been agreement. Colt hauled him up and shoved him toward where Dutch and Briggs were rounding up the other two would-be thieves, their rifles trained on the intruders. Then Colt turned to Elena, and the rage drained from his face, replaced by concern so raw it made her chest tighten. "Are you hurt? Did he—" "I'm fine," Elena managed, though she was shaking. "He grabbed me, but I got away. I'm fine." Colt pulled her into his arms without hesitation, holding her tight against his chest. Elena could feel his heart racing, could hear the rough edge to his breathing. "When I saw him touch you, He broke off, his arms tightening around her. "I've never been that scared in my life." Elena wrapped her arms around his waist, letting herself be held, letting herself feel safe. "You got here in time. I'm all right." Lucas appeared with more ranch hands, and Colt reluctantly released Elena to help secure the rustlers. They tied the three men up and loaded them into a wagon to take to the sheriff in Redemption Creek. "You did good, Miss Elena," Dutch said gruffly, nodding with approval. "Quick thinking with that bell. Could have been a lot worse if they'd gotten away with Thunder." Thunder was Colt's prized stallion, worth more than all the other horses combined. Elena hadn't even thought about the financial loss. She'd just reacted, trying to protect what belonged to the ranch. After the rustlers were hauled away and the excitement died down, Colt insisted on walking Elena to her cabin despite her protests that she was perfectly capable of walking alone. "Humor me," he said, his voice still edged with tension. "I need to know you're safe." At her door he paused, his hands curling into fists at his sides as if he was fighting the urge to reach for her again. In the moonlight, Elena could see a bruise forming on his cheekbone and a split in his lower lip. "You're hurt," she said, stepping closer. "Come inside. Let me clean that." "It's nothing. Colt Harridan, don't make me argue with you when we both know I'm going to win." Elena opened the door and gestured inside. "Sit down." A smile tugged at his injured lip. "Yes, ma'am." Inside the cabin, Elena lit the lamp and poured water into her wash basin. She dampened a clean cloth and turned to find Colt sitting at her small table, watching her with an intensity that made her hands tremble slightly. "This might sting," she warned, gently dabbing at the cut on his lip. Colt didn't flinch. His eyes never left her face as she worked, cleaning the wound with careful attention. When she moved to the bruise on his cheek, he caught her wrist gently. "Elena." She looked down at him, her heart in her throat. "Yes?" "When I saw that man grab you, when I thought he might hurt you," Colt's voice was rough with emotion. "I realized something. This isn't just about my mother's letter or some prophecy. This is about you, who you are, how you make me feel. How I haven't felt this alive, this present, since before she died." Elena set down the cloth with shaking hands. "Colt, I'm falling for you." The words came out fierce and certain. "I know it's too soon. I know it's complicated, but I can't pretend anymore that these midnight visits are just about checking on horses. I come to the stables because that's where you are, because an hour with you is worth more than a full night's sleep." Elena's breath caught. Every practical instinct told her to be cautious, to protect herself, to remember that she'd only known this man for 9 days. But her heart, her lonely, grieving heart that had started to heal in his presence, knew a different truth. "I'm falling for you too," she whispered, "and it terrifies me because I've lost everyone I've ever loved. I don't know if I can survive that kind of loss again." Colt stood, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness. "I can't promise that loss will never come. Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise that whatever time we have, I will cherish you, protect you, stand beside you as an equal, not above or below. That's the only kind of partnership I want." Tears pricked Elena's eyes. "That's what I want too." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. But Elena rose to meet him, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle, reverent, full of unspoken promises. When they finally broke apart, Colt rested his forehead against hers. "I should go," he murmured, "before I forget every gentlemanly intention I have." Elena smiled against his cheek. "You're already more of a gentleman than any man I've ever met." "That's because you inspire it." He pressed a soft kiss to her forehead, then forced himself to step back. "Get some rest, Elena. I'll see you tomorrow night." "You mean tonight? It's already tomorrow." "Smart and beautiful. I'm a lucky man." With one last lingering look, he left, and Elena sank onto her bed, touching her lips and marveling at how much her life had changed in just over a week. The next few days passed in a haze of work and stolen moments. Colt no longer pretended his nightly visits were about ranch business. He simply appeared in the stables around midnight, and they talked while Elena made her rounds. Sometimes they sat together in companionable silence. Sometimes they shared stories about their pasts. And sometimes, more and more often, Colt would pull her into his arms and kiss her until they were both breathless. Lucas noticed, of course. One afternoon when Elena was leaving the kitchen with her supper basket, he fell into step beside her. "So you and my brother," he said conversationally. "That's really happening." Elena felt heat creep into her cheeks. "Is that a problem?" "Are you kidding? It's the best thing that's happened to him in years." Lucas's grin was genuine. "I haven't seen Colt this happy since before Ma got sick. Hell, maybe even before that. Our father did a number on him, made him think emotions were weakness. But with you, he's different, lighter. He's an extraordinary man." "He is. He's also stubborn as hell and tends to take on too much responsibility." Lucas's expression grew more serious. "He needs someone who'll call him on his bullshit and won't let him carry the world alone. I think that's you." "I hope so," Elena said quietly, "because he's become very important to me, very quickly." "Good. Just—" Lucas paused, choosing his words carefully. "Be patient with him. He's not used to letting people in, and he's definitely not used to being happy. Sometimes he'll pull back, try to protect himself. Don't let him." "I won't," Elena promised. "Thank you, Lucas." "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you meet him at his most impossible." Lucas's grin returned. "Which you'll probably see tonight, since Storm's been showing signs." Colt gets tense when births are imminent. Lucas was right. When Elena arrived at the stables that evening, she found Colt already there, pacing outside Storm's stall with barely controlled anxiety. "She's close," he said without preamble. "Maybe a few hours. I don't like how restless she is." Elena checked the mare carefully, noting the signs of early labor. "She's fine, Colt. First-time mothers are always restless. It's normal." "What if something goes wrong?" "Then we'll handle it. Together." Elena took his hand, squeezing it firmly. "You need to trust me on this. I've done this dozens of times." "I know. He ran his free hand through his hair. "Storm's special. She's the first mare I bought with my own money, not my father's. She represents the new direction of this ranch. If I lose her—" "You won't. I won't let that happen." Elena stood on her toes and kissed him gently. "Now stop hovering and let me work. You're making her nervous." Colt managed a tight smile. "Yes, ma'am." But he didn't leave. He settled onto a hay bale outside the stall, clearly planning to wait out the birth. Elena didn't argue. She understood that some fears couldn't be reasoned away, only endured. Storm's labor progressed slowly through the evening hours. Elena monitored her closely, talking in low, soothing tones, providing encouragement and comfort. Around 2 in the morning, the mare finally lay down, her sides heaving with contractions. "Here we go," Elena murmured, positioning herself to assist. The first sign that something was wrong came when she saw hooves emerging, but not in the right position. Instead of 2 front hooves pointing forward with the nose between them, she saw what looked like hind hooves. Breech birth. Elena's stomach dropped. Breech births were dangerous, often fatal if not handled correctly. The foal could suffocate, the mare could hemorrhage. Everything depended on speed and skill. "Colt!" she called, keeping her voice calm despite the ice flooding her veins. "I need you." He was beside her in an instant. "What's wrong?" Breach presentation, the foal's coming backward. Elena met his eyes, saw her own fear reflected there. I need to try to turn it, but if I can't, we'll have to pull it as is. That's risky for both of them. Colt's face went pale, but his voice stayed steady. Tell me what to do. Keep Storm calm, talk to her, stroke her neck. She needs to stay as relaxed as possible while I work. What followed was the most terrifying hour of Elena's life, more intense even than Bella's difficult birth, because the stakes were higher, the danger more immediate. With Colt murmuring steady encouragement to the laboring mare, Elena worked with painstaking care to assess the foal's position. The foal was alive. She could feel movement, the rapid flutter of a heartbeat. But it was completely breech, with both hind legs extended and the front legs tucked forward. Turning it would be nearly impossible in the narrow birth canal. I can't turn it, Elena said, her voice tight with fear. We have to pull it breech. It's the only option. Is that safe? No. But it's all we've got. Elena looked at Colt across Storm's laboring body. I need you to help me pull when she contracts. We have to be quick, but we can't pull too hard or we'll injure them both. Colt nodded, his jaw set with determination. He moved to her side, his hands joining hers as they prepared to assist. Storm contracted, and they pulled gently but firmly. The hind legs emerged further, then the hindquarters. But the foal was large, the shoulders broad, and progress was agonizingly slow. Sweat dripped into Elena's eyes. Her arms screamed with effort. Storm was weakening, her breathing becoming labored. Come on, Elena whispered. Come on, baby. Help us out. Just a little more. Another contraction. Another pull. The foal's body emerged to its shoulders, but then stuck. The head was still inside, and if they didn't get the foal out in the next minute, it would suffocate. Pull, Elena commanded, her voice sharp with desperation. Now, Colt. Hard as you can. They pulled together, throwing all their strength into it. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, with a rush of fluid and blood, the foal slid free into their waiting hands. It wasn't breathing. No, Elena gasped. She cleared the foal's airway frantically, her hands shaking. Come on, breathe, breathe. Colt grabbed a piece of straw and tickled the foal's nostril, an old horseman's trick to stimulate breathing. For 3 endless seconds, nothing happened. Then the foal gasped, coughed, and drew in a shuddering breath. Elena nearly sobbed with relief. She rubbed the foal vigorously with clean towels, stimulating circulation and breathing. Behind them, Storm lifted her head weakly, whinnying to her baby. It's a colt, Colt said, his voice rough with emotion. Storm had a colt. The little foal was dark gray like his mother, with long, gangly legs and a white star on his forehead. Despite the traumatic birth, he was already trying to lift his head, instinct driving him toward his mother. Elena checked Storm carefully, ensuring there was no dangerous bleeding or signs of internal injury. The mare was exhausted but stable, already nuzzling her newborn with gentle devotion. They're going to be all right, Elena whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Both of them. Colt pulled her into his arms without warning, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. She felt him shaking, or maybe that was her. They'd just lived through a nightmare and somehow come out the other side with 2 lives saved. You did it, he said into her hair. Elena, you saved them both. We did it. I couldn't have pulled him out alone. They stood there in the bloody straw, covered in birth fluids and exhausted beyond measure, watching Storm's colt struggle to his feet for the first time. The little guy fell twice before finally managing to stand, wobbling on stick-thin legs. He's perfect, Colt said softly. Absolutely perfect. Elena turned in his arms to look up at him, and what she saw in his face took her breath away. Joy, relief, wonder, and something deeper, something that looked like love. Elena, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. There's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you days ago. What? That advertisement I placed in Denver. I didn't just put it in one paper. I put it in 12 different newspapers across Colorado and Wyoming. Do you know how many people responded? Elena shook her head mutely. Over 40. Men, women, experienced hands from all over. I interviewed 3 of them before you. Turn them all down. Colt's hands came up to frame her face, his touch infinitely gentle despite the roughness of his calloused palms. Because my mother's letter didn't just say someone would come at midnight. It said I'd recognize her when I saw her, that she'd have my mother's strength and kindness, that she'd understand horses the way my mother did, not just as animals, but as souls worth caring for. Tears blurred Elena's vision. Colt, I've been waiting for you since spring, Elena. Since the day I buried my mother and read her letter and decided to believe in the possibility she saw. I placed those advertisements in 12 papers, checked the Rusty Nail every night for 2 months, interviewed people I knew weren't right, all because some part of me believed she was telling the truth. His thumb brushed away a tear that escaped down her cheek. And then you walked into that saloon at midnight, fierce and frightened and so damn beautiful, and I knew you were the one she meant. How could you know? We'd just met? Because looking at you felt like remembering something I'd forgotten existed. Hope, possibility. The feeling that maybe I could build something more than my father's legacy of bitterness and mistakes. Colt leaned down, his forehead touching hers. I'm in love with you, Elena McRae. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but it's true, and I needed you to know before... Elena cut him off with a kiss, pouring everything she felt into it, gratitude and wonder and a love so fierce it terrified her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she whispered against his lips, I love you too. I think I started falling the moment you stood up for me outside the saloon, and I kept falling every night you came to the stables, every conversation we had, every time you looked at me like I was someone precious rather than just hired help. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I love you, Colt Harridan, and that scares me to death, because you've lost people before. Because everyone I've ever loved has left me, my parents, my old life, everything. Loving you means risking that pain again. Colt's expression was achingly tender. I can't promise I'll live forever. Nobody can, but I can promise that whatever time we have, I will love you with everything I am. I will never leave you by choice. And I will build a life with you that's worthy of the risk you're taking. He paused, then added with a slight smile, Besides, you're not getting rid of me now. You saved my favorite mare and her colt. You're stuck with me. Elena laughed through her tears. I suppose there are worse fates. Name one. I can't. Not when you're looking at me like that. Like what? Like I'm the answer to every question you've ever asked. Colt's smile softened into something reverent. That's because you are. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring every moment. Around them, the stable was quiet except for Storm's gentle breathing and the soft sounds of her colt nursing. Dawn was still an hour away, and in the lamplight, covered in straw and blood and utterly exhausted, Elena thought she'd never been happier. I have something I want to show you, Colt said suddenly. When your shift ends, will you come with me? Where? It's a surprise, but I think you'll like it. Elena smiled. Then yes, I'll come with you. They spent the remaining hour before dawn sitting together in Storm's stall, backs against the wall, watching the new colt explore his world on unsteady legs. Colt held Elena's hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm, and she let herself imagine a future she'd thought lost forever, a future with love and partnership and purpose. When the sun finally rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Colt helped Elena to her feet and led her out of the stables. But instead of walking toward her cabin, he guided her toward the hills behind the ranch. Where are we going? Elena asked, curious. You'll see. They climbed a gentle slope through morning mist, and at the top, Colt stopped. Spread before them in a hidden meadow was the frame of a house, not complete, but far enough along that Elena could see what it would become. A beautiful home with large windows facing the sunrise, a wide porch, space for a family. I started building this last spring, Colt said quietly, after my mother died. She always said the main ranch house was my father's, built to his specifications and his temperament. She said when I was ready, I should build my own place. Something that represented who I wanted to be, not who he was. Elena walked through the skeletal frame, touching the fresh-cut wood, imagining walls and windows and a life lived within. It's beautiful. It's going to be our home. yours and mine. Colt came to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. If you'll have it, if you'll have me. Elena turned in his arms, her heart so full she thought it might burst. Are you asking me to marry you, Colt Harridan? Not yet. Not until I can offer you a completed house and a proper ring and everything you deserve. He smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. But I'm telling you my intentions. I'm building this house for us. And when it's done, I'm going to ask you to be my wife, to be my partner in every sense of the word. So you'll have fair warning. Fair warning received, Elena whispered, blinking back tears. And just so you know my intentions, when you ask, I'm going to say yes. Colt's answering smile was bright enough to rival the rising sun. They stood in the meadow watching the sunrise paint the skeleton of their future home in shades of gold and amber, and Elena felt something shift deep in her soul, a settling, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. When Colt finally walked her back to her cabin, his hand warm and steady in hers, the world felt different somehow, more solid, more real. Get some sleep, he murmured at her door, kissing her softly. Tonight I want to take you somewhere. Another surprise? A proper date, actually, if you'll agree to it. His smile was almost shy, an expression that looked endearing on his usually serious face. There's a dance in town tonight, the Harvest Festival. I'd like to take you if you're willing to be seen on my arm in public. Elena's heart swelled. I'd be honored. 7 o'clock then. I'll pick you up. He kissed her once more, lingering this time before forcing himself to step back. Sleep well, Elena. She watched him walk away, and only when he disappeared around the barn did she finally go inside. But sleep eluded her despite her exhaustion. Her mind kept returning to the meadow, to the house taking shape there, to the future Colt was building for them with his own 2 hands. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of her mother's garden in Missouri. But in the dream, it wasn't surrounded by the old farmhouse of her childhood. It was nestled beside a new home with wide windows and a porch where children played, and Colt stood in the doorway smiling at her with an expression of such love it made her chest ache. She woke in the early afternoon to find a dress box on her porch with a note in Mrs. Chen's elegant script. Every woman deserves something beautiful to wear when a good man asks her to dance. This belonged to Catherine. She would have wanted you to have it. Inside was a dress the color of deep wine, simple in cut but exquisitely made, with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Elena held it up to herself and knew instinctively it would fit perfectly. Mrs. Chen appeared at her door moments later, as if she'd been waiting for Elena to wake. You like it? It's beautiful, but I can't possibly. Yes, you can. Mrs. Catherine, she would be happy knowing it goes to someone Mr. Colt loves. The older woman's eyes crinkled with warmth. That dress, she wore it the night Mr. Samuel proposed to her, back before the drinking and the bitterness. She kept it all these years, said someday her son would need it for someone special. Mrs. Chen reached out and touched Elena's cheek gently. You are that someone special. Elena's throat tightened with emotion. Did she really know? In her letter, did she really predict this? Mrs. Catherine, she had a gift for seeing what others could not. She knew her son was becoming hard like his father, knew he needed someone strong enough to match him, but gentle enough to soften him. Mrs. Chen smiled. She described you perfectly in that letter, you know. Said you would come at midnight, would understand horses like she did, would have known loss and come through it stronger. She said you would teach Mr. Colt to live again, not just survive. How could she possibly know all that? A mother knows her child's heart, sometimes better than the child knows it himself. Mrs. Chen patted Elena's hand. Now come. I will help you with your hair. By the time 7 o'clock arrived, Elena was transformed. The wine-colored dress fit as if it had been made for her, the rich fabric bringing out the warmth in her skin. Mrs. Chen had arranged her dark hair in an elegant, upswept style, with a few soft curls framing her face. When Elena looked in the small mirror, she barely recognized herself. Gone was the desperate, dusty woman who'd stepped off the stagecoach 2 weeks ago, replaced by someone who looked confident, beautiful, cherished. Colt's reaction when he saw her made every moment of preparation worthwhile. He stood frozen in her doorway, his eyes wide, his usual composure completely shattered. He was dressed in dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a black vest that emphasized his broad shoulders, his dark hair neatly combed, his jaw freshly shaved. "Elena," he breathed, I don't have words." "You clean up pretty well yourself," she managed, her cheeks warm under his intense gaze. He offered his arm, and she took it, marveling at how right it felt to walk beside him. Lucas and Mrs. Chen watched from the main house porch, both grinning like they'd orchestrated the entire affair. Lucas let out a low whistle. "You two are going to cause quite a stir in town," he called. "Try not to break too many hearts, brother." Colt ignored him, helping Elena into the wagon he'd hitched earlier. This wasn't the utilitarian work wagon, but a smaller, finer one with cushioned seats and lanterns hanging from polished posts. He'd clearly taken care with the details, and that thoughtfulness made Elena's heart swell. The ride to Redemption Creek took 40 minutes, and they filled it with easy conversation about the ranch, the horses, the progress on the house. But beneath the ordinary topics was an undercurrent of awareness, of anticipation for what the evening held. "I should warn you," Colt said as they approached town. "Everyone's going to want to know who you are. Redemption Creek is small and gossip travels fast. They'll have questions." "What should I tell them?" "The truth." He glanced at her, his expression serious. "That you're the woman I intend to marry, if she'll have me. That she's the best thing that's happened to this town since the railroad came through. That any man lucky enough to dance with her better treat her with respect or answer to me." Elena laughed, delighted by his protectiveness. "That might be a bit much for a first date." "Then what would you prefer I say?" "How about that I'm your partner? That we're building something together?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I don't want people to think I'm just another possession you've acquired, Colt. I want them to see us as equals." His hand found hers, squeezing gently. "That's exactly what you are. What we are. And anyone who suggests otherwise will hear about it from both of us." The town square was transformed for the Harvest Festival, with lanterns strung between buildings and tables laden with food. A small stage had been erected at one end where musicians were tuning their instruments and already couples were gathering to dance. The whole town seemed to have turned out, farmers and shopkeepers, families with children, even a few of the more respectable saloon girls in their Sunday best. The moment Colt helped Elena down from the wagon, conversation stopped. Elena felt the weight of dozens of eyes turning their way, assessing, judging, speculating. She lifted her chin and met their gazes steadily, refusing to be cowed. "Colt Harridan," a booming voice called out. "That you, boy?" An enormous man with a silver beard approached, his smile genuine despite his intimidating size. "Sheriff Morrison," Colt said, shaking the man's hand. "Good to see you. This is Elena McRae. She's working at the ranch." "Working at the ranch, is she?" The sheriff's eyes twinkled with amusement as he tipped his hat to Elena. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss McRae, though I suspect there's more to the story than just working at the ranch." "Sheriff Morrison helped me catch those rustlers last week," Elena said, extending her hand. The sheriff shook it with surprising gentleness for such a large man. "Heard about that. Heard you rang the alarm bell and fought off one of them yourself." He nodded approvingly. "Takes grit to stand your ground like that. Redemption Creek could use more folks with your kind of spine." More people approached throughout the evening, the general store owner and his wife, the blacksmith, the teacher from the schoolhouse. Each introduction reinforced what Elena was beginning to understand. Colt was respected in this town, even admired, and people were intensely curious about the woman who'd captured his attention. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the boarding house, was particularly direct. "Colt Harridan hasn't brought a woman to a town function in 5 years," she said, her sharp eyes studying Elena. "Last one was Sally Jenkins, and that ended badly when she decided ranch life wasn't refined enough for her tastes. You planning to stick around, or are you another city girl playing at frontier life?" "I'm from Missouri originally," Elena said evenly, refusing to be ruffled. "I was raised on a horse ranch, and I've been working with animals my whole life. This isn't playing at anything. This is who I am." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. "Good. That boy deserves someone who won't run at the first sign of hardship. He's had enough disappointment in his life." When the music started, Colt led Elena to the dance floor with a confidence that surprised her. "I didn't know you could dance," she said as he pulled her into position for a waltz. "My mother insisted, said a man who couldn't dance was missing out on one of life's pleasures." His hand was warm on her waist, his other hand holding hers with gentle firmness. She was right about that, like she was right about most things. They moved together across the wooden floor, and Elena was struck by how natural it felt. Colt led with quiet assurance, and she followed easily, their bodies finding a rhythm that felt like it had existed long before this moment. Around them, other couples danced, but Elena barely noticed. Her world had narrowed to the man holding her, to the warmth in his eyes, and the small smile playing at his lips. "Everyone's watching us," she murmured. "Let them watch. I don't care." Colt pulled her slightly closer, the movement subtle but unmistakable. "I've spent too many years worrying about what people think, trying to live up to expectations that weren't mine. Tonight, I just want to dance with you and not think about anything else." "That's a good plan." They danced through 3 songs before finally taking a break. Colt brought Elena a cup of punch, and they found a quieter spot near the edge of the square where they could watch the festivities without being in the thick of them. "Your mother's dress was perfect," Elena said, smoothing the wine-colored fabric. "Mrs. Chen told me Catherine wore it the night your father proposed." Colt's expression grew distant, tinged with sadness. "I remember this dress. She wore it on special occasions when I was young, before my father's drinking got bad. She'd put it on and suddenly look younger, happier, like she was remembering who she used to be before life hardened her. She sounds like she was an amazing woman." "She was. She held this ranch together through sheer force of will when my father was too drunk to function. She taught me and Lucas how to read and write, how to treat people with respect, how to see the beauty in small things." Colt's voice roughened with emotion. "Losing her broke something in me. I didn't think I'd ever feel whole again." Elena took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "And now? Now I'm starting to believe I can be more than my grief, more than my father's legacy." He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her breath catch. "You make me want to be the man my mother believed I could be." "You already are that man, Colt. You just needed to see it yourself." Before he could respond, Lucas appeared with a pretty blonde woman on his arm. "There you are, brother. I've been looking all over. Elena, this is Sarah Morrison, the sheriff's daughter. Sarah, this is the remarkable Elena McRae, who's got my brother tied in knots." Sarah laughed, swatting Lucas's arm playfully. "Don't embarrass them. It's nice to meet you, Elena. Lucas has been singing your praises all week, says you saved one of their best mares." "2 mares, actually," Lucas corrected. "Bella and Storm, both difficult births, both successful thanks to Elena's skill." His pride was evident and genuine. "My brother finally did something smart and hired someone who actually knows what they're doing." They chatted for a while, and Elena found herself liking Sarah immediately. The woman was warm and funny, with a quick wit that matched Lucas's. Watching the 2 couples together, Elena could almost see the future. Gatherings like this with friends, building a community, creating a life that extended beyond just the ranch. When Lucas and Sarah left to dance, Colt turned to Elena with a serious expression. "There's something I need to tell you, something I should have mentioned earlier." Elena's stomach tightened. "What is it?" "The house in the meadow. I'm not building it alone. I've hired craftsmen from Denver, good ones, because I want it done right, done quickly." He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. "I know we've only known each other 2 weeks, and I know that's not enough time by conventional standards. But I also know what I feel, and I know what I want. I want to finish that house and make you my wife before winter comes." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "That's 2 months away." "I know, and if that's too fast, if you need more time, I'll wait. I'll wait as long as you need." Colt's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, a gesture that had become familiar and dear. "But I won't pretend I'm not hoping you'll say yes sooner rather than later." "People will talk," Elena said, though her practical concerns were rapidly dissolving under the intensity of his gaze. "They'll say we rushed into things, that we barely know each other." "People always talk. The question is whether we let them dictate our lives." Colt lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I know you, Elena McRae. I know you're brave and skilled and kind. I know you fight for what matters and don't quit when things get hard. I know the way you hum to the horses at 3 in the morning, and how you take your coffee with too much sugar, and that you get a little crease between your eyebrows when you're concentrating. I know that losing your parents taught you that life is fragile and time is precious. So tell me, what else do I need to know that would change how I feel about you?" Elena blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the truth of his words. "Nothing," she whispered. "There's nothing that would change it because I feel the same way. I know you carry too much responsibility and don't sleep enough. I know you're trying to build something better than what your father left you. I know you loved your mother deeply and that her loss still aches. I know you're gentle with animals and fierce in protecting what's yours. And I know that when you look at me, I feel seen in a way I never have before. Then marry me." The words came out raw and urgent. "Not someday when the house is finished and I have a proper ring and everything's perfect. Marry me now, tomorrow, this week. Let's build that life together instead of waiting for the right moment that might never come. Colt, I know it's crazy. I know it's too fast. But my mother's last words to me were, 'Don't waste time on fear when you could be spending it on love.' And she was right, Elena. She was right about you coming, right about recognizing you, right about everything. So why would she be wrong about this?" Elena looked at the man before her, this strong, wounded, hopeful man who'd been waiting for her since spring without even knowing her name. She thought about her parents, about how her father had proposed to her mother after knowing her for 3 weeks, and they'd had 25 happy years together. She thought about how life could end without warning, how waiting for perfect could mean missing out on good. "Yes," she said, the word coming out certain and clear. "Yes, I'll marry you. Not tomorrow, because that's too fast even for us. But soon, before the first snow." The joy that transformed Colt's face was worth every moment of uncertainty, every practical concern she was setting aside. He pulled her into his arms right there in the town square, kissing her with a passion that made several nearby matrons gasp and titter. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena laughed at the scandalized expressions around them. "I think we just confirmed every piece of gossip they've been whispering. Good. Let them know exactly how I feel about you." Colt kept his arm around her waist, pulling her close against his side. "Let the whole town know that Elena McRae is going to be my wife. And any man who thinks that gives him the right to disrespect her will answer to me. You're very protective. Only of the people I love." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And there's only one of those right now, so you're getting the full force of it." They stayed at the festival until the musicians packed up their instruments and the lanterns began to burn low. On the ride back to the ranch, Elena leaned against Colt's shoulder, exhausted but happy in a way she hadn't thought possible 2 weeks ago. "When should we tell Lucas and Mrs. Chen?" she asked. "Tomorrow. Tonight, I just want it to be ours." Colt's arm tightened around her. "Though I suspect Mrs. Chen already knows. That woman has an uncanny ability to know everything before anyone tells her." He was right. When they arrived back at the ranch near midnight, Mrs. Chen was waiting on the main house porch despite the late hour. She took one look at their faces and smiled. "So, when is the wedding?" Colt laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "How did you— Never mind. I don't want to know." He helped Elena down from the wagon, then turned to Mrs. Chen. "Before the first snow. We haven't set an exact date yet." "Good. That gives me time to prepare properly. Mrs. Catherine, she would have wanted a beautiful celebration." Mrs. Chen's eyes grew misty. She would have been so happy to see this day. "She knew," Elena said softly. Somehow, she knew. A mother always knows. Mrs. Chen came down the steps and embraced Elena warmly. "Welcome to the family, child. You have made an old woman very happy tonight." After Mrs. Chen went inside, Colt walked Elena to her cabin. At the door he paused, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. "I love you," he said simply. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes to me." "I already know I won't regret it." Elena rose on her toes to kiss him softly. "Because loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done." "Even though we're rushing into marriage after 2 weeks?" "Especially because of that. Life's too short to waste time being cautious about the things that matter most." She smiled against his lips. Your mother was right about that. She usually was. Colt kissed her once more, then forced himself to step back. Get some sleep. We have a wedding to plan. And a house to finish. That too. Though I'm thinking we might move into it before it's completely done. I don't want to wait any longer than necessary to start our life together. Elena watched him walk away into the darkness, and instead of going to bed, she sat on her cabin porch and looked up at the stars. 2 weeks ago, she'd been desperate and alone with $3 to her name and no hope for the future. Now she was engaged to a man she loved, planning a wedding, preparing to build a life in a place that felt like home. Her father used to say that sometimes the best things in life came when you stopped looking for them and just stayed open to possibility. Elena hadn't been looking for love when she stepped off that stagecoach at midnight. She'd been looking for survival, for a paycheck, for a way to make it through another day. But she'd found so much more. She'd found a partner who valued her skills and her strength. She'd found a man who saw her as an equal, who wanted to build something together rather than expecting her to fit into something already built. She'd found a place where her work mattered, where she could use the skills her father had taught her to make a real difference. Most of all, she'd found hope, the kind of hope that made the future look bright instead of terrifying, that made her believe good things were still possible even after loss. The stable bell rang softly in the distance, not an alarm, just the wind moving it. Elena smiled, remembering the night she'd rung it desperately for help with Bella's birth, the night Colt had come running and they'd worked together to save a life. That had been the beginning of this, really, the moment when partnership had started to become something more. She went inside and changed into her work clothes, ready to start her shift. The mares needed checking, Storm's colt needed monitoring, and there was always work to be done on a ranch. But now every task felt different. Now she wasn't just working for wages, she was working to build something permanent, something that would last. When she entered the stables, she found Colt already there, leaning against Storm's stall and watching the colt nurse. Couldn't sleep? She asked, joining him. Didn't want to. Wanted to be here when you started your shift. He pulled her into his arms, and they stood together in the warm darkness, surrounded by the gentle sounds of horses at rest. Besides, I realized something tonight. What's that? These midnight hours with you. They're my favorite part of every day. The quiet, the work, the way you talk to the horses like they understand every word, the way you look in lamplight with straw in your hair. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I don't want to give that up just because we're getting married. I want to keep working beside you, keep sharing these quiet hours. Elena's heart swelled with love for this man who understood that she didn't want to be rescued from work but included in it, who saw partnership as working together rather than division of labor along traditional lines. Then we will, she promised. We'll work together during foaling season, and we'll build that house together, and we'll make decisions together. Equal partners in everything. Everything, Colt agreed, though I reserve the right to be overprotective sometimes. And I reserve the right to call you on it when you go too far. Fair enough. He smiled, that rare, beautiful smile that transformed his whole face. Come on, let's check on the rest of the mares. We have 11 more to get through foaling season, and I have a feeling it's going to be a busy few weeks. They made the rounds together, checking each mare with practiced efficiency, their movements synchronized from working together night after night. When they reached Bella's stall, they found her dozing peacefully with her now sturdy filly nestled beside her. Hard to believe that was only 2 weeks ago, Elena mused. That terrifying birth, not knowing if either of them would survive. You saved them. Just like you saved Storm and her colt. Just like you're going to save every foal that needs you this season. Colt's voice was full of quiet confidence. You're extraordinary at what you do, Elena. I hope you know that. I'm good at my work because my father taught me well, but I'm better at it now because I have you as a partner. She leaned into his warmth. Everything's better with you. They spent the rest of the night working side by side, talking softly about wedding plans and the house and the future stretching before them. As dawn approached and the sky began to lighten, Colt pulled Elena outside to watch the sunrise from the stable yard. Look, he said, pointing to the meadow where their house stood. In the early morning light, the frame looked almost complete, the shape of their future clearly visible against the pink-streaked sky. Another few weeks and we can move in, start our life together properly. Elena wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. Our life together started the night I stepped off that stagecoach and you hired me on the spot without checking my references. Everything since has just been learning how good it could be. Then imagine how good it's going to get when we have a lifetime ahead of us. As the sun rose over Harridan Ranch, painting everything in gold, Elena closed her eyes and let herself imagine exactly that. A lifetime of sunrises with this man, of working together and building together and growing old together. It was a future she'd thought lost forever when her parents died, a hope she'd given up on during those desperate months in Denver. But hope, it turned out, had been waiting for her all along. Waiting in a midnight job at a cowboy's ranch, in a man who'd been searching for her since spring, in a future being built one board at a time in a meadow where wildflowers grew. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity and anticipation. Elena continued her midnight shifts in the stables while Colt threw himself into finishing the house with an urgency that made Lucas shake his head in amused exasperation. The craftsmen from Denver worked from dawn until dusk, and often Colt joined them after his ranch duties were done, hammering and sawing by lamplight until Elena physically dragged him away to rest. "You're going to collapse before the wedding if you keep this up," she scolded one night, finding him in the meadow at 2 a.m, still working on window frames. "I want it perfect for you." Colt's shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cool autumn air, his hands blistered from hours of work. "I want you to walk into a finished home, not a construction site." Elena took the hammer from his hands and set it aside. "Colt Harridan, listen to me. I don't need perfect. I need you healthy and whole on our wedding day. The house will get done whether you kill yourself over it or not. But no buts. Come back to the ranch with me. You can work on it tomorrow in daylight, like a sensible person." She softened her tone, cupping his face in her hands. "I appreciate what you're doing. I love that you want to give me something beautiful. But the most beautiful thing you can give me is yourself, and that requires you actually taking care of your body." Colt leaned into her touch, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. "I just want everything to be right. Want to prove I can build something good, something that lasts." "You already are. Every day with you proves that." Elena kissed him gently. "Now come on. Mrs. Chen left pot roast and you haven't eaten since breakfast." He let her lead him back to the main house, and they ate together in the warm kitchen while Mrs. Chen fussed over both of them, muttering in Cantonese about foolish men who didn't know when to rest. After eating, Elena walked Colt to his room and kissed him goodnight at the door. "Sleep," she commanded. "That's an order from your future wife." "Yes, ma'am." Colt smiled tiredly. "You're going to be trouble once we're married, aren't you?" "Absolutely. Someone has to keep you from working yourself to death." She kissed him once more. "I love you. Now sleep." The next morning, Elena woke to find a note slipped under her cabin door. In Colt's bold handwriting, it read, "You were right. I slept 8 hours and feel almost human again. Thank you for taking care of me. I promise to be more sensible. Meet me in the meadow after your shift. I have something to show you." See. When Elena climbed to the meadow that evening, she gasped. The house was nearly complete. The roof was on, the windows installed, and someone had built a porch that wrapped around the front and side. It looked like a real home now, not just a promise of one. Colt emerged from the front door, wiping his hands on his trousers. "What do you think?" "It's beautiful." Elena walked up the porch steps, running her hand along the smooth railing. "When did all this happen?" "The crew worked a double shift yesterday and today. I paid them extra to push through." He took her hand, pulling her inside. "Come see." The interior took Elena's breath away. The main room was spacious and light-filled, with large windows facing both sunrise and sunset. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and the floors were polished pine that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Doorways led to other rooms, a kitchen, a bedroom, a study. "There's space for children eventually," Colt said, pointing to 2 smaller rooms at the back. "And this," he led her to the kitchen, "has a real cook stove and running water from a pump. Lucas helped me install it yesterday." Elena traced her fingers along the smooth countertop, imagining preparing meals here, building a life here. It's more than I ever dreamed of. You deserve more than dreams. You deserve reality. Colt wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. I know we said before the first snow, but the house is almost done. What would you say to getting married in 3 weeks? That gives Mrs. Chen time to plan properly, gives you time to prepare, but doesn't make us wait until winter. 3 weeks. Elena turned in his arms, her heart racing. That's October 20th. It's also the anniversary of the day my mother and father got married, back when they were still happy. Colt's expression grew wistful. She would have liked knowing we chose the same date, would have seen it as a blessing, a chance to redeem what my father corrupted. Elena thought about Catherine Harridan's letter, about the prophecy that had brought them together, about the dress she'd worn to the harvest festival. Everything about this felt like it was meant to be, like pieces falling into place according to some design larger than themselves. October 20th it is, she said. 3 weeks from today. Colt's answering smile was brilliant. He swept her into his arms and spun her around the empty kitchen, both of them laughing like children. When he finally set her down, they were both breathless and grinning. I need to get you a ring, he said suddenly. A proper engagement ring. We've been so focused on the house and the wedding that I forgot. I don't need a ring to know you're committed to me. Elena pressed her hand over his heart. This is enough. You're enough. But I want to give you one anyway. My mother's wedding ring is in a safe at the bank. I could go to town tomorrow and get it if you'd like to wear it. The offer touched Elena deeply. Are you sure? That's a precious family heirloom. And you're going to be family. My wife, the person I choose to build a life with. Colt's thumb traced her jawline tenderly. Besides, my mother would want you to have it. She loved that ring, wore it every day, even after my father stopped deserving it. She told me once that the ring represented the promise they'd made to each other, and just because he broke his promise didn't mean she had to break hers. She sounds like she was incredibly strong. She was. And so are you. That's why you'd honor her memory by wearing it. The next afternoon, Colt rode into town and returned with a simple gold band set with a small but perfect sapphire. He slipped it onto Elena's finger in the stable that evening, with only the horses as witnesses. It fits perfectly, Elena whispered, watching the stone catch the lamplight. Of course it does. You were meant to wear it. Colt kissed her hand just above the ring. 3 weeks, Elena. 3 weeks, and you'll be my wife. Those 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Mrs. Chen took charge of the wedding planning with the efficiency of a military general, organizing food, flowers, and guests with brisk competence. The entire town was invited, and Elena found herself overwhelmed by the outpouring of support from people she barely knew. Sarah Morrison helped Elena alter Catherine's wine-colored dress to serve as her wedding gown, adding delicate lace at the collar and sleeves. Something old, something new, Sarah said, pinning the lace in place. The dress is old, the lace is new, and you need something borrowed and something blue still. The ring is blue, Elena pointed out, holding up her hand to show the sapphire. Does that count? It counts. Now you just need something borrowed. Sarah smiled mischievously. I have the perfect thing. On the morning of October 20th, Elena woke to find Sarah and Mrs. Chen at her cabin door, carrying baskets and wearing determined expressions. Time to make you a bride, Mrs. Chen announced, sweeping inside without waiting for permission. They spent hours preparing. Mrs. Chen washed and styled Elena's hair in an intricate updo woven with small white flowers from the ranch garden. Sarah produced the borrowed item, a delicate pearl comb that had belonged to her grandmother. When Elena finally looked in the mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The wine-colored dress fit her perfectly, the new lace adding elegance without overpowering the simple beauty of the original design. Catherine's sapphire ring sparkled on her finger. The pearl comb gleamed in her dark hair. She looked like someone who belonged in this life, in this place, with this man. You're beautiful, Sarah said, her eyes misting. Colt's going to forget how to breathe when he sees you. The wedding was held in the meadow beside the new house, with the autumn sun painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Nearly the entire town had turned out, filling the meadow with their presence and their blessing. Someone had built an arch decorated with pine boughs and wildflowers, and rows of chairs faced it where guests sat waiting. Lucas appeared at Elena's cabin to escort her, looking uncomfortable in his formal clothes but grinning widely. "Ready to become my sister?" "More than ready." Elena took his offered arm, her heart pounding with anticipation and joy. They walked together up the hill toward the meadow, and when they crested the rise, Elena saw Colt waiting beneath the arch. He wore a black suit she'd never seen before, his dark hair neatly combed, his expression a mixture of nervousness and wonder. But when he saw her, everything else fell away. His eyes went wide, his mouth opening slightly in awe, and Elena saw him blink rapidly as if fighting tears. Lucas walked her down the makeshift aisle between the chairs, and Elena was vaguely aware of people smiling, of Mrs. Chen crying openly, of the beauty of the day. But her focus was entirely on Colt, on the way he looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked, the solution to every problem he'd ever faced. When Lucas placed her hand in Colt's, he whispered, "Take care of her, brother. She's the best thing that's ever happened to you." "I know," Colt whispered back, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. The ceremony was simple, conducted by the circuit preacher who visited Redemption Creek once a month. Elena barely heard the words, too caught up in the feeling of Colt's hand holding hers, of standing on the threshold of their future together. When the preacher asked if Colt would take Elena as his wife, his voice rang out clear and certain. "I will. With everything I am and everything I have, I will." And when Elena was asked the same question, she answered with equal conviction. "I will. Today and every day for the rest of my life, I will." Colt slipped a second ring onto her finger, a wedding band that matched the engagement ring perfectly. Then Elena placed a simple gold band on his finger, marking him as hers just as she was marked as his. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher said, smiling warmly. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Harridan." Colt pulled Elena into his arms and kissed her with a passion that made the crowd whoop and holler. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, the meadow erupted in applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," the preacher announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Colt Harridan." The celebration that followed was everything Elena could have hoped for. Long tables had been set up beneath the trees, laden with food prepared by half the town. Musicians played while people danced on a wooden platform someone had constructed for the occasion. Children ran through the meadow shrieking with laughter, and the whole scene felt like something out of a dream. Elena danced with Colt, with Lucas, with Sheriff Morrison, who proved surprisingly light on his feet for such a large man. She accepted congratulations from what felt like hundreds of people, all of them genuinely happy for the newlyweds. Mrs. Patterson, the boarding house owner who'd been so skeptical at the Harvest Festival, pulled Elena aside to say, "I was wrong about you. You're exactly what that boy needed. Welcome to Redemption Creek, Mrs. Harridan." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and orange, Colt took Elena's hand and led her away from the celebration toward their new house. "Where are we going?" she asked, though she already suspected. "Home." The word was simple but weighted with meaning. "I want to carry my wife over the threshold of our house." The interior had been transformed while they were at the ceremony. Lanterns hung from hooks, casting warm light throughout the rooms. Flowers filled every available surface, their sweet scent perfuming the air. A fire crackled in the hearth, taking the chill off the autumn evening. And in the bedroom, someone, probably Mrs. Chen, had made up the bed with fresh linens and a beautiful quilt. Colt swept Elena into his arms and carried her through the front door, both of them laughing at the traditional gesture made awkward by her voluminous skirts. He set her down gently in the center of their main room, and they stood together looking around at the home they'd built. "We did it," Elena whispered. "We actually did it." "We did." Colt pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "We took a midnight job posting and a mother's prophetic letter and 2 weeks of getting to know each other, and we turned it into this, a marriage, a home, a future." "Do you think your mother knew?" Elena asked softly. "When she wrote that letter, do you think she could actually see this happening?" "I think she knew me well enough to know what kind of person I needed. Someone strong enough to challenge me, gentle enough to soften my edges, practical enough to call me on my nonsense." Colt smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. And I think she had faith that if I opened my heart even a crack, the right person would find her way in. I'm so grateful she had that faith, that you believed her enough to place those advertisements. Elena turned in his arms to face him fully. I was so lost when I came here, Colt. I didn't think I'd ever feel whole again after losing my parents. But you've given me something I thought was gone forever. What's that? A family, a home, a place where I belong. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. You've given me everything. Then we're even, because you've given me the same. Colt wiped away her tears with gentle thumbs. I was so focused on duty and responsibility that I'd forgotten how to live. You reminded me that work isn't the same as life, that there's joy to be found in partnership and love and building something together. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the lamplight of their new home, both marveling at the journey that had brought them here. Outside, they could hear the distant sounds of the celebration continuing in the meadow, but inside was quiet and peaceful and entirely theirs. I should probably go back to the party, Elena said reluctantly. People will notice if we're gone too long. Let them notice. Colt's smile turned mischievous. We're married now. We're allowed to sneak away from our own wedding celebration. Is that what we're doing? Sneaking away? Absolutely. I've been waiting weeks to have you all to myself without worrying about propriety or what people might think. He pulled her toward the bedroom. And I'm not wasting another minute of our wedding night making small talk with the sheriff. Elena laughed, letting him lead her. You're incorrigible. You married me anyway. Best decision I ever made. The next morning, Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the bedroom window, and Colt's arm draped across her waist. She lay still for a moment, savoring the feeling of waking up in her own home, in her own bed, beside her husband. The word still felt strange and wonderful. Husband. She was a married woman now, Elena Harridan, with a home and a future, and a man who loved her beyond measure. Colt stirred beside her, his eyes opening slowly. When he saw her watching him, his face broke into a sleepy smile. Good morning, Mrs. Harridan. Good morning, Mr. Harridan. Elena traced her fingers along his jawline. How does it feel to wake up a married man? Like every morning should feel from now on. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. They lay tangled together, talking quietly about nothing and everything until the sound of horses whinnying reminded them both that the ranch still needed tending. I should check on the mares, Elena said reluctantly. We should check on the mares, Colt corrected. We're partners, remember? That means we work together. They dressed and walked hand in hand down to the stables, where they found Lucas had already done the morning feeding. A note pinned to the stable door read, Congratulations, newlyweds. Took care of morning chores so you could sleep in. You're welcome. Your brother is thoughtful, Elena said. My brother is a romantic who thinks he's clever. But Colt was smiling. Though I appreciate the gesture. The weeks that followed established new rhythms. Elena continued working the midnight shift in the stables, but now Colt joined her every night, the two of them working side by side to care for the horses. During the day, they finished furnishing the house, adding personal touches that made it truly theirs. Mrs. Chen visited often, bringing food and advice and stories about Catherine Harridan that helped Elena understand the woman whose legacy she'd inherited. The remaining mares all delivered their foals successfully, and by the time the first snow fell in late November, Harridan Ranch had 12 healthy new horses, a record that had neighboring ranchers coming to ask Colt's secret. It's not a secret, Colt told them, his arm around Elena's waist. It's partnership. My wife knows horses better than anyone I've ever met, and I'm smart enough to trust her expertise. Business grew. Word spread about the quality of Harridan horses and the skill of the couple who raised them. By spring, they had more orders for foals than they could fill, and Colt made the decision to expand the breeding program. We'll need more help, he said one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. The operation's getting too big for just us and the day hands. We could train someone, Elena suggested. Someone young who wants to learn the business properly. Timothy's shown real aptitude. He might be interested in learning the night shift work. Good idea. I'll talk to him tomorrow. Colt pulled Elena closer against his side. You know what this means, though? If we train Timothy to handle nights, you could shift to days, work normal hours like regular people. Elena was quiet for a moment, considering. The midnight shift had been her introduction to the ranch, the hours where she and Colt had fallen in love. Part of her hated to give it up. Or, Colt continued, reading her hesitation, we could keep working nights together and train Timothy for days. I've gotten used to our midnight hours. Not sure I want to give them up either. Let's train him for days, Elena decided. The night work is ours. It always has been. Our time, Colt agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. Just like this house, this ranch, this life we're building, ours. 2 years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. The ranch prospered beyond Colt's most optimistic projections. Lucas married Sarah Morrison in a ceremony nearly as large as Colt and Elena's had been, and the two couples became inseparable, sharing Sunday dinners and holidays and the daily joys and frustrations of ranch life. Mrs. Chen remained the heart of the main house, though she spent more and more time at Elena and Colt's home in the meadow, drawn by the warmth and laughter that filled it. She taught Elena her mother's recipes, shared stories about Catherine Harridan, and became the grandmother Elena had never known. In the spring of their 3rd year of marriage, Elena discovered she was pregnant. She told Colt one night in the stables, while they were checking on a mare heavy with her own foal. "We're going to have a baby," she said simply, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. Colt's eyes went wide, then filled with tears. He dropped to his knees in the straw, pressing his face against her middle, his shoulders shaking with emotion. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Mrs. Chen confirmed it yesterday. She said she knew weeks ago but was waiting for me to figure it out myself." Elena ran her fingers through his hair. "We're going to be parents, Colt." "A baby." His voice was muffled against her dress. "Our baby." "Elena, He looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. "I'm terrified and thrilled, and I don't know if I know how to be a father, but I'm going to try so hard." "You're going to be an amazing father," Elena interrupted, pulling him to his feet and into her arms. "You're going to teach our child about horses and hard work and integrity. You're going to show them what real partnership looks like. And you're going to love them the way your mother loved you, completely, unconditionally, with everything you have." "We're going to love them," Colt corrected, his hands cradling her face. "Together. Equal partners in parenting like we're equal partners in everything else." Their daughter was born in January during a snowstorm, with Mrs. Chen serving as midwife and Colt refusing to leave Elena's side, despite the older woman's protests that childbirth was no place for a husband. Elena labored for 12 hours before Catherine Rose Harridan entered the world, screaming her displeasure at the cold and the indignity of birth. Colt wept openly when he held his daughter for the first time, this tiny, perfect person with Elena's dark hair and his own serious eyes. "She's beautiful," he whispered, cradling her with infinite care. "She's absolutely perfect." "Just like her father said she'd be," Elena murmured, exhausted but happy beyond words. Catherine, called Katie by everyone except Mrs. Chen, who insisted on using her full name, grew into a bright, curious child who loved the horses as much as her parents did. By the time she was 3, she was accompanying them on their nightly rounds, her small hand tucked trustingly in Colt's as they checked on the mares. A son followed 2 years later, named Samuel after Colt's father, but called Sam to distinguish him from the grandfather he'd never known. Where Katie was serious and observant like Colt, Sam was all energy and laughter, constantly getting into mischief and charming his way out of consequences. "He's going to be trouble," Lucas predicted, watching his nephew attempt to climb into a horse stall at age 2. "He's perfect," Elena countered, scooping Sam up before he could get himself kicked. "Just like his sister, just like all of this." By their 10th anniversary, the ranch had become one of the most successful horse breeding operations in Colorado. The house in the meadow had been expanded to accommodate their growing family, with additions that maintained the simple beauty of the original structure. The main ranch house still stood, now occupied by Lucas and Sarah and their own 3 children, creating a compound where the two families lived and worked together. Elena stood on the porch one evening, watching Colt teach Katie and Sam how to gentle a new foal. The sun was setting behind them, painting the scene in golden light, and she felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost brought her to her knees. She'd come to this ranch 10 years ago with $3 and no hope, desperate for any work that would keep her alive. She'd expected nothing more than a paycheck and a roof over her head. Instead, she'd found everything. A husband who loved her as an equal, who valued her strength as much as her tenderness, who made her laugh and challenged her, and stood beside her through every joy and hardship. Children who filled their home with noise and love and purpose, who reminded her daily that life continued, that hope was real, that the future could be bright even after devastating loss. A family that extended beyond blood. Mrs. Chen with her wisdom and warmth, Lucas and Sarah with their friendship and support, the ranch hands who'd become extended family, the town that had welcomed her and made her one of their own. Work that mattered, that used the skills her father had taught her, that made a real difference in the world even if that world was just one ranch in one small town in Colorado. Most of all, she'd found home. Not just a physical place, though the house Colt had built was beautiful and beloved, but home in the sense of belonging, of being seen and known and valued for exactly who she was. "Mama," Katie called from the corral, "come see! The foal let me touch her nose." Elena walked down to join her family, and Colt made room for her against the fence, his arm coming around her automatically. Sam climbed into her arms, sticky from candy Mrs. Chen had given him, chattering about the foal's long legs and soft ears. "Happy?" Colt asked quietly, his lips close to her ear. "Beyond happy," Elena answered honestly. "I didn't know this kind of happiness was possible." "Neither did I. Not until a desperate woman with $3 and extraordinary skill stepped off a stagecoach at midnight and changed my entire life." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Best hiring decision I ever made. Best job I ever took." They stood together watching their children play while the sun set over their ranch, over their home, over the life they'd built together from nothing but hope and hard work and a mother's prophetic letter. Elena thought about Catherine Harridan's words, about how she'd predicted someone would come at midnight who would teach Colt to live again. But it had gone both ways. Colt had taught Elena to live again too, to believe that love was possible after loss, that building a future didn't mean forgetting the past, that strength and vulnerability could coexist in the same heart. She'd taken a midnight job at a cowboy's ranch, unaware he'd been waiting for her since spring, unaware that she'd been searching for him too, even though she hadn't known his name or face, or that he existed. But they'd found each other anyway, in a dusty saloon at midnight, in a stable where life began, in a meadow where they built their home. And now, 10 years and a lifetime later, Elena understood the full truth of what they'd created. Not just a marriage or a ranch or a family, though they'd built all those things, but something deeper, something that Catherine Harridan had seen even when her son couldn't. A partnership of equals. A love that expanded rather than confined. A home built on mutual respect and shared dreams and the daily choice to stand together through whatever came. Elena had lost her independence when her parents died. Or so she'd thought. But she'd been wrong. She hadn't lost it. She'd simply been waiting to find the place and the person where her independence could flourish alongside love, where her strength was valued and her voice mattered, where she could be fully herself and fully part of something larger. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky and Colt called the children in for supper, Elena took one last look at the ranch spread before her. The stables where 12 mares had given birth to the foundation of their success. The main house where Mrs. Chen kept their history alive through stories and love. The meadow house where her children slept and dreamed and grew. This was home. Not because a job posting had brought her here, or because a man had been waiting, or because a mother's letter had predicted it, but because Elena had chosen it, had chosen Colt, had chosen this life, had chosen to believe that she deserved the happiness she'd found here. She'd taken a midnight job for survival and found the man who'd been waiting for her. But more than that, she'd found herself. Found the woman who could stand beside a strong man without losing her own strength. Found the mother who could raise children with love and wisdom. Found the horsewoman whose skill and knowledge made a real difference. Found the partner whose voice mattered and whose dreams were valued. She'd found the home she never knew she deserved. And standing there with her husband's arm around her waist and her children's laughter filling the evening air, Elena McRae Harridan understood the greatest truth of all. Sometimes the best things in life aren't the ones we plan for, or search for, or even hope for. Sometimes they're the ones that find us when we're brave enough to take a risk, foolish enough to believe in possibility, and open enough to recognize love when it appears at midnight in the most unexpected places. She'd been all those things, brave and foolish and open, and she'd been rewarded with everything. "Elena?" Colt's voice pulled her from her reverie. "You coming inside?" She looked at her husband, at the man who'd placed 12 advertisements and waited for months and recognized her the moment she walked through a saloon door, at the man who'd built her a house and given her a family and loved her exactly as she was. "Yes," she said, taking his hand. "I'm coming home." And together they walked into the house they'd built, into the life they'd created, into the future that stretched bright and endless before them. Home at last.